We don't require any ratification of anything for us to be united. And anyone who says we require ratification, that person doesn't know what unity is about. Unity is about us coming together with a paper or no paper. When you see an African saying, this is what will unite.
France made the Francophone countries sign the pact for the continuation of colonization.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Now, this is a wake-up call to all of you who are watching this video. This is a wake-up call and a call for unity for all black people and to those in the diaspora and those in Africa. This is the time we should unite. This is the time we should stop the division that exists amongst us. So let's watch this video, then have a very quick discussion at the end of it. Thank you so much.
I get money in my agency for studies on Africa's potential to process mangoes. But I don't get the money to say, can you help me build the pilot plant? It's $3 million. Can you help me combine your aid from the Dutch government with a processing company where you put part of the money and I build a pilot plant to show President that he can process his mangoes and stuff and put it on Tesco in London? That's what I want to see in the food crisis now. Not just the emergency, but how we combine in public PPP, combine ODA with some private sector venture capital to help these countries link to global markets. So I raise the issue of corporate social responsibility. Because let us face it, today Africa is washed with minerals. That's why the investment is coming. And by the way, in spite of lack of rule of law and democracy, they're coming in to sign contracts with us. But can we have a CSR, a corporate social responsibility, that says to these companies, as Ellen Johnson Sirleaf is trying to do in Liberia with Mittal, to say, hey, we want to know the revenues. We want to see that you don't import chickens to feed your local workers, but you help our farmers produce the chicken. Can we have a common value system with CSR for everybody, whether it's Chinese, American, whatever company? Because today it is the reality that our comparative advantage is still minerals. What we want to see today, after 50 years of training with the world, is will these companies also say, you know something, it is in our enlightened self-interest that we also invest in agribusiness supply chain, so these people supply us our food. So we help the economy evolve and the education system.
Yes, that the North must take it. Let the debate be about which regions have not received and which region will you support. Not that the regions who have never received must wait for some ratification to apply a principle that seeks to unite the continent. The forefathers who came before us wanted to eliminate unnecessary contestation amongst Africans by coming up with these democratic principles which will cover all the regions. If you're concerned about the unity of this continent and you are not serving the interest of the imperialist and colonialist, you will never have a difficulty on application of a principle that will unite Africans. Yes. And that's what this body is about. So it is so embarrassing that former leaders of this institution can do everything in their power to divide this institution and to undermine the legitimacy of this institution. You can use your majority and keep this power and this presidency in your regions. And if that is the unity of Africa you are talking about, that power must only circulate in your regions. Yeah. Go on with it. But be aware that you are serving the interest of imperialism that seeks to keep us divided. The unity of this continent will not wait for ratification of anything. Yes. The unity of this continent needs us to apply it as in yesterday. Yes. We don't require any ratification of anything for us to be united. And anyone who says we require ratification, that person doesn't know what unity is about. Unity is about us coming together with a paper or no paper. When you see an African saying, this is what will unite
in diaspora. The more I begin to understand not only our Africa, but the more I begin to understand us as Black people, why is it that we are the most disrespected people on earth, no matter where you find us? on this globe. They often wondered why these black people are so smart and so indestructible. Maybe it's because of that third eye. No, it is the melanin. That's what makes us special. That's what makes us the origin of humanity, which is our motherland. Our motherland, Africa. The continent with everything and anything the world needs. The continent that everybody is going to for their needs. But the continent that we, the children of Africa, are busy running away from. That keeps me up every night. The more I try to dig deeper in understanding as to why Africa is where Africa is today, I couldn't help but find myself repeatedly going back to the beginning to say, how did we end up where we are as Africans? How did we get here? Not only as black people, but as Africans. The colonizers started coming to Africa, starting with the Portuguese, followed with slavery. But by 1884, after they had been haphazardly going into our continent, looting from the Africans, pretty soon they started looting from each other the loot that they had looted from the Africans. And before you know it, they were killing each other. And they were getting ready to have a war, a European war on the African soil. So Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany at that time, called his sidekick Leopold, King Leopold of Belgium, said, listen, we got a problem. We're getting ready to kill each other and have a European war in Africa. Why don't we call all the colonizers? That was France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, and of course the mighty Britain. Let's all meet in Berlin, Germany, and strategize on how we can organize ourselves so we can effectively see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. They proceeded to chop up our Africa into tiny little countries that we know of today. Economies that are designed to see to it that they will never make it on their own. And in the event those small economies do make it, they're easy to destabilize. Who, in their right mind, puts a country together like Gambia, Burundi, Togo, Djibouti, Lesotho, Swaziland, and many, if not all, African countries. Each one of them was given the same sovereignty as China, as India. If this world was to be a boxing game, you see, in boxing, they understand that heavyweights belong in the heavyweight boxing ring, middleweights in the middleweights, lightweights and wannabes in their rings. Wannabes are way out there. You don't take a wannabe boxer and throw them in the same ring with the heavyweight. But what's being done to our Africa? Let's start negotiating. It's country against country. Countries, please stand up. Little Gambia stands up. And Gambia is supposed to negotiate with China. Lesotho is supposed to negotiate with India. Swaziland must jump in with the United States. You must go in. You see, the Europeans realized as individual European countries, they can make it. So they came together as the European Union. So they negotiate as a bloc. So yeah, Djibouti, you go in with EU. And when the African countries lose, the world stands back and says, what's wrong with you, African countries? Why aren't you able to manage your people? How can that be? Where is the parity? African countries are wannabe boxers who are constantly being thrown into the heavyweight boxing ring, and we are getting our rear ends kicked day in and day out. (1884), fast forward 2019, nothing has changed. The strategy that was put in place to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated remains alive and well. And yet in our minds we tend to think Berlin Conference is a thing of the past. Well, my brothers and sisters, Berlin Conference is alive and well. And allow me to take it home for you. Have you ever wondered why intra-Africa trade is sitting at 18%? I'll tell you why. We have 43 different currencies on the continent. It's difficult to trade with each other because of the currencies. It's easier for us to exchange with the US dollar with the euro than with each other. Why is that? Berlin Conference. It's easier for Mozambique to send Mozambican oil outside Mozambique to Europe and everywhere else, just so Zimbabwe next door can buy it from across the oceans. It's easier for a company that's manufacturing the best ceramic tiles in Africa, in Egypt. That company sends its tiles to Italy, only for the Africans to turn around and buy the same tiles, 20, 30 times the cost. Why is it that we are not trading with each other? It's because, starting in South Africa, there's a road that goes up until maybe 2-3 kilometers from the border with Botswana. And that same road picks up 2-3 kilometers into Botswana. And if only we could connect the two. But Berlin Conference said, no, you're different. You're another country. You can't look at it this way. If we were to connect all the existing power lines in Africa today, we would provide electricity to 30 million more people. And in the process, we would save $20 billion. But the reason we can't connect the power lines, thanks to Berlin Conference. We're different countries. We can cross that border. Why are our children crossing the Mediterranean in search of nothing? It's because little Gambia can only create so many jobs. And a young man in Gambia, which is surrounded by Senegal, cannot go to Senegal and look for a job. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. Question then becomes, if you look at all the issues we're dealing with today in Africa, one by one, every one of them relates back to the Berlin Conference and our inability to work together as one continent, one Africa, speaking with one voice. Thanks. Something that was just downright terrible. Made the African leaders sign what they call the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. France made the Francophone countries sign the pact for the continuation of colonization. Allow me to highlight a few of the items in the pact for the continuation of colonization, and I urge all of you to Google it and read it, and if that does not disgust you, I don't know what will. First, the French said, well, you see, we built a few schools, a few roads, a few hospitals, taught you about the fork and knife and sitting on a table and eating with utensils. We're going to call that the colonial debt. And for that you shall pay to perpetuity. In addition, you will deposit 85% of your bank reserves with the Minister of Finance, the French Minister of Finance. Collectively, the Minister of Finance, the French Minister of Finance will take all your deposits. It was 85% back then. It's now down to about 60. The French minister will invest that money in the French stock exchange under the French name. You may or may not know the returns. Today, France is taking out of Africa, Francophone Africa, over $500 billion. Over $500 billion. We, the Africans, the poor countries, we're giving France over $500 billion a year, year in, year out. And no one is talking about it. The latest figures are saying for every $14 billion that France takes out of Africa, by the time they finish investing it, they're realizing upwards of $300 billion for every $14 billion. So in actuality, France is taking out of Africa trillions of dollars year in, year out. Should any of those countries wish to access some of their own money that they deposited with France, they have to submit their own financial reports for the country. And if approved, they can only access up to 20% of that money as a loan at commercial interest rates. Figure that one out. That is our reality. It gets better. They were also told that if you need any military equipment, you can only purchase it from France. Your military can only be trained by France. That France will have military presence in your own country and can invade you without notice should they feel French interests are being violated. Language of instruction shall be French. All your minerals discovered, yet to be discovered, France has the first right of refusal. All the contracts, big contracts, private and public, French companies have the first right of refusal. Now, my brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, if you were to go home and run for president, and your first day in office, your chief of staff comes to you and says, oh, by the way, Mr. President, Madam President, before you start, I must read you the do's and don'ts as stipulated by the pact for the continuation of colonization. And your chief of staff reads this to you. What power do you have? This is precisely what our colonizers wanted. To leave us in a position that no matter how hard we try, trying to get a leg up is mission impossible.
Stop electing puppets is the answer Julius Malema gave to the question of what does Africa or African countries have to do to be able to get a permanent seat at the UN Security Council? This is what he said.
I often hear a lot of people advocating for Africa to have a permanent voice within the UN Security Council. You mentioned it just now, but I would like to know from you what exactly needs to be done for Africa to be recognized in that fashion, for it to be a permanent voice there within the UN Security Council.
No, South Africa and the whole of African continent must stop electing puppets. They need to elect people who are going to challenge the status quo, and not from a lip service. They must be able to put up a case in such a way that their voice is being heard. So we have a lot of clowns that get elected here in the continent. They go there and then they go shopping instead of going to fight for the recognition of the African continent. So we still have got a long way to go. We still have some of the countries in Africa that are still paying colonial taxes to France and things like that. And we expect such people to go to the UN Security Council and agree that Africa must be represented. So we need to politically conscientize and take over the African continent and position Africa in the UN Security Council at the same level as India, China, Russia, America, and all of that. Because the reality is that we are equal. Actually, we have got more resources than them, but we are treated like we are the stepchildren of the world. Because our leadership hasn't demonstrated that power to force the Security Council and the UN to agree that Africa should be a permanent member of the Security Council. The Security Council has become one of the strategic organs of the UN, and it's important that we have a voice, and that voice ought to be permanent, and it must exercise the same powers that the rest of permanent members are exercising.
Very simple, right? Elect leaders that will stand up for you and your rights, that will demand for what is rightfully yours, and that will stand on the truth, not bow down, not turn a blind eye, but actually do the right thing. That is what you need to do. That's the first step before even talking about permanent seat at the UN Security Council. He actually said something that I found funny. These people, they'll travel, right, to these countries, and what are they going to do? They're going to do shopping instead of doing their job, instead of being a servant. They are civil servants. They're there to serve the people. They're there to represent the people back home, but they go and shop. He said shop, but I'll add party and have fun and enjoy their lives. They forget about why exactly they're there. So, you know, as he put it, it's plain and simple. You first elect those people, the leaders that will advocate for you, and then everything else follows. But anyways, fam, let us know down below what your thoughts are about what Julius Malema said. Do you believe that is the first step to getting a permanent seat at the UN Security Council?
Hello, brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing fine. Now, I want to take this time to thank all of you who have been coming to this channel to watch videos and who have subscribed to this channel in a special way. To those who pay membership fee, I thank you all. Now, let's take this time today to talk about the advancements that the African continent has been making in the last few years. Now, there is need for us to talk about Africa because I feel like we are talking about Black unity, but we've not told our brothers and sisters who are not in the continent the truth. And so they are those who are in this continent but do not still know whatever is going on. Now, you all know the African Union and how it has been operating in Africa. You all know the ECOWAS, you know, SADC, and all these other organizations that have really been put in place to divide Africa the more. Now, I'll be talking about African Union and why Ibrahim Traore, Julius Malema, and other leaders have been criticizing this organization. Now, the African Union, just like the United Nations, has always been biased. And this is the biggest puppet body or organization that exists in Africa. And this is where all puppets in Africa meet. When they started this organization, the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, and all those who were in place during that time, they didn't want this African Union to work this way. They wanted to see a more unified Africa. They wanted to see all Black people unified for a common cause. But that's not whatever is happening right now in Africa because things are falling apart. You go to the western part of Africa and you see they are much divided. You come to Eastern Africa, people are divided. You come to Central Africa, people are divided. Different bodies or organizations are being created each day to continue separating Africa. I've been saying that the only valid organization that is working in Africa to unify Africa is the Sahel. The AES it's the only organization that is not driven by the Western principles and policies in Africa. And when we want to change the course of this continent, we must first educate our own people. We must educate on how things are being done, because we do not want to see the same Africa. We do not want to see the same errors that we made. When Kwame Nkrumah stood for the unity of Africa, when Muammar Gaddafi stood for the unity of Africa, and when others, and the latest being Magufuli from Tanzania, who stood for the unity of Africa, they were all eliminated. And this is when the tension comes in, and people are now asking about the life of Julius Malema, people asking about the life of Ibrahim Traore, Dr. Arikan, and Pilo Lumumba. The truth must be said and must be told that, yes, we are asking for their safety, but what are we doing to make sure that their efforts do not go unrewarded, that they are working so hard in Africa to unify Africa, to unify the Western Africa, and to make sure that Africa stands as a one continent with one currency, with one president, with one parliament. A system of government that will care for the people. A system of the government that is going to get rid of the exploitation in Africa. This continent has suffered a lot, and it continues to suffer in the hands of the leaders that we have elected in this continent. And when we say we want unity, we must first educate our masses. We must educate the people who sit at the lowest level of decision making and those who sit at the highest table of decision making. Why do you think the people in the villages, why do you think the less educated must receive this civil education about the black unity? And why do you think you who is watching this video needs to spread this gospel? It is because they have always survived in the division of Africa. They have always survived in the division of black people. That when we are divided, that's when neocolonialism took place. That when we got to be divided, and when we used their policies in Africa, which has always divided us the more, this is when our fall began. Now, the only way to the top, the only way that we can rescue ourselves and make sure that things are working for us and things are working for the people of Africa and those who are less privileged and those who sit on mineral resources but they do not know. They are being evicted by these governments to allow this oppressive nature to take place. That you are being evicted for a company that belongs to the US to come and mine the gold that you are sitting on. So there is need for us as people of black descent to come together and have a discussion. And this is why we are seeing a petition is in Africa to make Ibrahim Traore the president of Africa. I do not know how many presidents are going to allow this in their countries, but this still stands. Even if it is not Ibrahim Traore, even if it is not Julius Malema, we one day need a president who will unify the whole of Africa. Some people are saying that having a single president in Africa is dangerous. Now, is having one president in the US dangerous? Is having one president in Russia dangerous? Is having one president in China dangerous? If you're talking about the size of Africa, it is almost the size of Russia combined with US and China. So we want a more unified Africa. We want an African continent where the people of Africa who are in the diaspora, who are suffering in the diaspora, will be welcomed back and be given the way out on how to settle here and make sure the skills they have, the skills they own, are being transferred to this continent. We do not want, or we do not need to hire white people to come and construct railways, roads, and assemble vehicles for our own countries. That these can also be done with our own brothers in the diaspora who have gained these skills. So when we say that we want a more unified Africa, I know this is going to be a threat to the Western world, and they are going to stop us as much as they can, because just last year they had tried to assassinate Ibrahim Traore 15 times. Can you imagine? And since he became and he ascended to power, they have tried to assassinate him 27 times. So it is very risky to have Africa united, but it is very happy for them to see us divided. And when we sit down and realize that we've always suffered because of the division that exists between us, we are going to unite ourselves. We are not going to allow anyone to come between us and try to divide us the more. They sent their missionaries to Africa to spread the gospel, yes. Then they distorted the gospel and started spreading fear. And we have no culture, we have no language in Africa, because people are trying to copy the white culture. And this is why you see those communities that have said no to their culture are being called primitive. And those who have accepted their culture are being called civilized. And people who are upright in their thinking. But if you decide to say no and stay to your norms and stay to your culture, then it becomes a problem. And the first people to talk bad about you will be black people. So we are going to change the narrative in Africa. We are going to change the way this continent has been operating. The youths who are watching this video, the elderly who are watching this video, and every person of age who is watching this video, you must know this is the time. If we are going to sit back and see the same things happening and just keep quiet, then I'm an enemy to this continent if I'm going to keep quiet about the vices that are taking place. And you are an enemy too if you keep quiet. So we must expose whenever we can, and we must change this continent for the better. I appreciate you for having taken your time to watch this video. And if it's your first time on this channel, please consider subscribing, sharing, commenting, and liking this video. Thank you so much. See you in our next episode.